intro. Man, the intro is great. Give it up for all the volunteers, please. This conference would not happen without them, dude. And I cannot wait to see this fucking tattoo. I cannot wait.
Eat the mic.
I'm sorry. Okay, good. I'm not used to this. So, all right. So today, again, my name is Josh Rickard. I'll kind of give you a little rundown. Sorry, I'm going to try to be good with the mic. But today we're going to talk about LLMs. I have this... I love themes when it comes to talks or whatever. I think it kind of plays into everything that we're storytelling and everything else. So today we're going to go deep, though. So if you have any experience with LLMs, who here actually has experience with LLMs, like on a daily or weekly basis? Yeah? Okay. Who here is brand new and never use it? Okay, good. All right. Cool. So we're going to go through and just kind of show you some tips, but also just kind of the evolution that we've seen so far in the past few years. So LLMs, prompting agents, assistants. Oh my! Again, my name is Josh Rickard. I have a background in blue team and digital forensics. Before that, I did like sysadmin and Windows security stuff. I've worked at a SOAR company, and I'm currently a senior threat detection engineer at Sublime Security, which is like a phishing defense platform. Do a lot of research. I have experience in product management, people management, and I was a senior software engineer for 2 billion event processing pipeline. Like, awesome stuff. So anyways, you can find more at MS Administrator. That stands for Microsoft Administrator, not Miss Administrator. It was a long time ago. And then Let's Automate It is my blog, so you can read anything that's kind of reference papers and all that stuff. So, all right, that's enough about me. So let's talk about this whole analogy that we're going to kind of go through, this trip down Oz. So we're in Kansas, so I thought, man, why not have a Wizard of Oz theme talk, right? M-I-Z? No?
Yo, you!
All right, at least one of you. So in this case, we're all Dorothy in this scenario. So just kind of think of us as people and humans in general, or Dorothy. We have all been inundated. We're just at home chilling. It was COVID and everything else. And then, man, LLMs hit. And we were just like, holy shit, what is all this magic? What is going on? Why is everyone freaking out? Blah, blah, blah. I know we all don't want to be here. I didn't really expect to be here, but we are. And so I think we have a choice to either learn and adapt or not. And I think that it can help in a lot of reasons. As previous talk talked about, I think I'm in the stance of LLMs are an amplifier of your own skills. I don't think that they're going to replace it, and I don't think they're going to augment and take away jobs. They will some, but I think if you are intelligent about how you use them and how you use the tool, I think you'll be successful and you won't have a concern long term. So we'll kind of go through this path. We got hit, right, by this tornado. This onslaught of shit. Anyways, who's here have heard of GPT-3? It's old. Did anyone ever use it back in 2020 or before? Okay. I did not. I kind of knew about it afterwards. It really all started way back in the day in like the 60s of Eliza. Anyone here ever heard of Eliza? It's a model that basically just repeated itself back to you. You asked it a question and it would just respond. It was super basic program back in the day. You can actually find examples of it online right now. If you just search Eliza, you'll find a whole bunch of stuff about it. But then ChatGPT came in 2022. That was like the big epicenter of like, oh man, we can just type in this stuff and get some cool responses. Cool. It was shit. I mean, it worked okay, but it was pretty crap. And then GPT-4 came out, which was more of an advanced model with a little bit of reasoning on top of it, and we'll go into the details of that. And then you have Claude, I think was the big epicenter, or the big, when Claude, Gemini, and Llama, those are other models, were released. I think that was the start of something completely different and what we're seeing today. Anyone here heard of DeepSeek R1? It's a model that basically was way more efficient at its inference phase, not the training phase. They basically threw 671 billion parameters at it and only activate 37 billion. So the training is huge in a huge computational event. But then the actual inference is super low, meaning you don't have to run the model on super high-end GPUs. You can run them on lower-end GPUs and still process. But it's a reasoning model, and there's problems with that, and we'll talk about that. And then OpenClaw. Who here has heard of OpenClaw? Okay. OpenClaw is kind of the thing that I think was in January this year, kind of was released. There's been other variants, and we'll talk about that, but OpenClaw was like the inundation, well, basically why all Mac Minis are off the market right now is because of OpenClaw and other variants. It is a huge, almost semi-autonomous LLM that can run 24/7 all the time, do actions on your behalf. It has a lot of access issues, and there's a bunch of problems, but really, that's kind of the preface of where we're at right now. It's like OpenClaw has been like the main thing in the past year or the past couple months. There's other variants. Again, we'll talk a little bit about this. But let's talk about also the players here. Right? We have OpenAI and ChatGPT, which is pretty well known, pretty the basic. Anthropic creates Claude, Claude Code, Claude Desktop. Those are different variants. Google has Gemini. Anyone here has a Google Workspace by chance? If you do, you pretty much Claude or Gemini is like integrated in every damn thing that they do. Meta and Llama, I've never used Llama, but it is a model that is out there. I heard it sucks, but who knows? I just haven't used it. XAI and Grok, which is Elon's Twitter bot, basically, or X bot. Is it X bot? I don't know. And then, again, OpenClaw. Who here has heard of Cursor as well? Okay, that's another big one. I actually, what was it? A week ago, Elon said that he was going to buy it for $60 billion. That started with $3 billion of evaluation. I don't know how those numbers work, but, you know, they are. And Cursor is basically an IDE. So it looks like Visual Studio Code. It's actually based off of Visual Studio Code, the Monaco, which is like the underlying framework, but integrates LLMs into it. So it's like a code editor on steroids. Instead of a Copilot, which you see in Visual Studio Code or Microsoft Copilot or GitHub Copilot, those are integrations on top. This platform is actually built on LLMs, really. And then all the AI startups, right? The hundreds of billions of dollars that are being invested, people pitching all these things. So all the players are everywhere, and we all see this, right? So let's talk about some terms here, though. Like, make sure we're all on the same page before we kind of dive down. LLM is the large language model. That's what you see. That's the OpenAI. That's the prompt. This is not AI. People think that it is. It isn't. Anyone here know of Alan Turing? Yeah, Turing had an imitation game was his thesis that basically until you can tell that you are not talking to a computer, it is not AI. It's kind of a standard measurement, I guess. And so LLMs are like that, but they're not thinking. They're basically, they have a huge map of a bunch of different data and attributes and other things that are predicting tokens, predicting the next iteration or the next word in a sentence. Prompt. So that's what you input. One thing that I'll say, and we'll go into the details here, but garbage in means garbage out, right? Like, if you do not give it guidelines, it will basically hallucinate and try to do a bunch of shit that it doesn't really, you didn't want it to do. Token. Anyone here know what a token is? We keep talking about that. Token is basically a word or a phrase or like a segment of text that is indexed. And they insert these tokens into these models, and it basically can re-reference, okay, where all has this been referenced, this word, and kind of build up a big map of data sources and attributes and weights and scores, and there's a whole bunch of shit. But really, it's just a word or a phrase is how I like to describe it. Context window. So that's a big, everyone says, oh, you need context, right? Like LLMs have a limited memory or a limited scope that they can actually load into their own memory. And that's called the context window. If you go outside of that window, it starts forgetting things and it starts not remembering. So some models have like 17 gigs of data you can throw at it. And that's its huge parameter window. But most are going to be pretty small. They're going to be like 37,000 characters or 170,000 characters or I'm sorry, words that you can kind of throw at. So some models can take huge documents and you can just throw it at it and it has no problem. Others won't be able to handle that load because it'll forget about earlier things in that context window. RAG, who here has heard of RAG? Yeah, it's kind of a weird ass name. I don't really. It's basically a vector database. This is a data science thing and a machine learning thing, but basically it can inject snippets of text at appropriate times during the reasoning process. So it's basically just like a side-loaded like cache of like, hey, add C++ data here, or add, this data when you're Python language information, or an API doc, or whatever, like in the context when you're processing reasoning. The agent itself, that's an LLM. There's a lot of different terms here, but I like to call agents an LLM that basically calls tools. Maybe another third party. We'll talk about MCP as well. Maybe they'll take actions and there's some sort of loop process. It's kind of semi-autonomous, but it's really just kind of you give it a prompt and it kind of goes through a process. A lot of people can just use ChatGPT as it is and not have any issues. But then when you're really wanting to accomplish something, like autonomous code generation and all that, you have to provide a little bit more detail, and that's where the agent kind of comes in. MCP, who here has heard of MCP? All right. MCP is the Model Context Protocol. This is really a way for APIs or LLMs to talk to a bunch of different services. So whether that's Salesforce, whether that's an internal database, a local file, a CSV file, whatever, it's really a wrapper around being able to call and send it text like, hey, give me all the IP addresses to enrich. And you have an MCP server that may call out to VirusTotal and hybrid analysis and like all of these different products, and then return one aggregated result. That's usually what the MCP is for, is so an LLM can talk and text, really. And then vibe coding. Anyone here ever vibe? So I'm old, so I like to call it chill coding, but that's just the 90s in me. But vibe coding is really just kind of iterating and prompting and then just kind of getting a response and saying, hey, let's update this. And you're just kind of going through the flow of communication, where we'll talk about more of like how you can use it in a more robust manner, at least from my opinion. All right, so we talk about all the good witch in this scenario. Some people would say it's a bad witch, but good witch in this scenario is the investors and the evangelists that are out there, the hyper evangelists. AI is going to take over the world. It's going to do amazing things. There's this magic. We're going to cure cancer. We're going to have intergalactic space travel. No more working. We're all going to go back to nature and do nothing. Right? Awesome. Sounds great. Then there's the other part where it's like, man, it's going to take all our jobs. All the white-collar jobs are going to be out. AI overloads, Matrix, all that. I don't believe in either one. I think that it's a tool, just like everything else. I think we'll actually go back more to humanities and poetry and everything else as we evolve as humans, but that's a huge philosophical debate that we can have at another time. The wicked witch, right? It's really our conscience. Maybe it's just me, though. So I'm going to kind of go on a little tangent here. So I wrote a paper recently, and it's about the externalities of AI. If you don't know what externalities, meaning the impact that AI has on our ecosystem and our lives, our human lives. It's a paper I wrote with a professor friend of mine named Scott Christensen from Mizzou, and we actually presented it at a symposium last week. But the paper, you can find it on my blog there, but it's a draft. But the point is that there's a lot of external impacts that LLMs have on our society that I want to make sure everyone kind of knows, because I think it helps understand your usage and how you can think and frame the impacts here. There's a huge environmental impact to LLMs that we've seen. Data centers are encroaching, where we're constantly you see requests in, I think, Festus, Missouri, and a whole bunch of others. They're trying to install data centers all over the place. The problem is that there's a huge problem with water extraction, water evaporative cooling for data centers. It's projected at 7 billion cubic meters of water being actually pulled out of our ecosystem by 2027 because of data centers. To put that in perspective, Fulton, if you know where Fulton is, it's a nuclear power plant, right? It's 0.5 5% of that in its total capacity at 49 million cubic meters for a full operating year at full capacity. So if you think of 7 billion, it's a huge number of water that's being extracted. So there's energy costs though. So energy to power all these. You know, we have all the FANG. You know, Google, Microsoft. Microsoft invested $16 billion into 3 Mile Island that's supposed to be open by next year or 2028, just to get a megawatt hour, basically, or megawatt. And then we also have Google and Facebook investing in small modular nuclear reactors for the first time by 2030. And we have not even talked about how we're going to waste, how we're going to like take care of all the e-waste or the impacts that it has on our environment. Like, where are we putting all these spent rods, and what happens if one of these melt down in LA? We don't really know. So there's a lot of precautions that we just don't know. And they're investing billions and billions of dollars of this. There's also the huge impact that it has on recycling. GPUs are fast cycle in data centers. They're improving. NVIDIA is improving all the time. AMD, blah, blah, blah. What happens to all the e-waste? We're not great as a society to actually recycle shit. So what do we do with all these like weird chemicals like erbium and turbine and, you know, shit like that? Yeah. So, sorry, going on a tangent here, but the other part is that mental health. You know, there's been cases of sycophancy and product liability issues where people have actually committed suicide by chatting with an LLM. There's been multiple cases of that, so there's a huge mental health problem that it surfaces. Also a scraping cost problem. The internet, I think, right now, as we know it, has a potential to change. Companies like Wikipedia, archive.org, those things are free, right? They're free resources, but LLMs are scraping them at huge costs, which is an infrastructure cost. If you've ever worked in software engineering, you know that egress and databases and caching, all of that has cost to it, and it's all imposed on them and not by anybody else. So basically, LLMs are gaining all the profit while putting costs on a lot of companies. And so that's a huge concern that no one's really talking about. And then there's other costs as well. But yeah, go ahead.
One thing I'll add as we're thinking about responsibly using it.
Yeah.
There's also the PTSD
yes.
that the trainers, the humans they use during training.
Yeah.
In Venezuela, Kenya.
Yep. Yeah, there's especially with photos and images, and there's like some crazy shit that you have to dig through to from a research and data collection perspective. Yeah. So again, my tangent. You can read the paper if you want. It's not very long. It's like 60 pages or something like that. It's getting peer reviewed now, but yeah, you can go check it out if you want. So I know we were all kind of in this whirlwind of shit with LLMs, and we don't really want to be here, but we're here. And so we just need to wake up and start progressing towards using these in an efficient manner and in a responsible way. So I think that we just need to get up and start walking. So we're on our little path, right? We're on the yellow brick road, and we're walking down, and you come across kind of the first iteration, right, as a scarecrow. It's the simple prompting. It's literally just kind of using it and getting a response and getting kind of iteratively communicating through words, right? Vibe coding, that's the other... a lot of different terms for vibe coding. Some people just think it's like you're sitting there and you're on a mic and text or speech to text. Some people just think you're just prompting back and forth, just saying, hey, add this and blah, blah, blah. It all depends. It's just chilling back. Maybe you're drinking a little bit. Who knows, you know. And then you kind of next evolution is we get into the small and medium-sized complexity. We're adding a little bit more requirements to your prompts and other details. And we'll show you some examples. So anyone here written a prompt that looks like this or similar? Just like read this file, create a script to do something, whatever. This is pretty basic. Like this is the start of using an LLM. So right here, there's a lot of different variants of what a Python script can do. It has to pull down that JSON and it has to do a bunch of stuff, but you're not really telling it, but it's not a complex task either. You're not really telling it all the details that it may need from like a business perspective or a scripting perspective, but it'll figure it out. And it's pretty basic. But the next kind of phase is really, we want to, well, before we get into that, actually, let's talk about what prompting is. Again, it is the natural language to describe your problem, your question, and your goals. Like, it's just using your own words. Use your own words. Just like you're talking to your buddy or your mom or whoever, use your own words. Provide this context, and we'll go into the details of what that means, but those are resources like files or other databases, or maybe your constraints. Maybe you want a Python script that parses a JSON, but maybe you just want all the technique value numbers. I don't know. I'm just throwing out something. You provide those kind of examples as well. Like, what do you want the input to be? What do you want maybe the output to be? How do you want it to be formatted? All those kind of details matter because it'll actually perform that reasoning. And one other tip is that you keep track of what you're actually working on and tell the LLM to actually generate an agent, or you can just say a markdown file, so I can reuse this same action again later. Like, you can just tell LLM to generate that and then reuse it and update it every single time as you get more and more advanced with your language and the way you kind of design things. Again, use speech to text if that's easier. I like writing. I seem to just be better at writing than speech to text, but I have friends that are really use that all day. So I don't know. Who here has used speech to text with ChatGPT and all that? Yeah, worked pretty well. Yeah. Sometimes I just ramble, so like it doesn't really help me, but try not to ramble here. And please ask questions, guys. If you have any, or I say guys, everyone, please ask questions if you have any questions. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So you were just talking about, like, after we do one prompt, you said to save that as a markdown file.
Yeah. So you can, you can basically tell LLM to generate a say, hey, everything that you've learned over our session, let's say, like of this chat session, whether it's, you're continually asking questions, modifying things, just say any of the lessons learned or whatever, output those so we can use them next time. Or output this in a way so the next time I can just give you the context and all the logic and shit will be the same underneath. So you can kind of iterate. And I'll show you better examples of that, like more complex than a JSON file. One thing that I will tell you is that I basically have written production apps just purely using prompting, 100%, and I do it pretty much every day. So it can work really, really well. It's kind of creepy. This is that like mid-level prompt, right? This is what I call a mid-level prompt. It'll probably be a little bit more, but the point is that you use your experience when you're starting out. That's how I recommend. Like, as a security analyst and phishing threat detection engineer, and as a software engineer, experience with Python, Flask, or Docker. Do you know why? Well, I'll just tell you. So because of you're giving those constraints or those requirements, here you can actually, because if you say, hey, build me an app that takes a phishing URL and does DNS and lookups and all that stuff, it might do it in Python, it might do it in some other language, it might do it in TypeScript, it might do it in something else. So providing that context will make it generate in code in the format and the requirements that you've set. Plus, use your own experience because that's what you can understand the most and easiest, at least starting out. I have one code. I do not know TypeScript, and we completely run web apps out of TypeScript, and I don't even have to really look at the code. I just kind of test it from a QA perspective. It's kind of creepy. But we have a lot of setup. So the other piece of this is that then you're saying, okay, create a simple Flask app to collect all this stuff. And so you're giving it the input, like, hey, I'm going to pass you in a URL, and I want you to display all this data about this using this framework. So that's kind of a mid-level prompt, I would say. Again, a little bit more on prompting in general and vibe coding. It's great. It's really cool when you're starting out, but there's no real true thought or design when it comes to LLM and just kind of what comes out of it, because there is a context window that we mentioned that it'll forget previous conversation, even in the same session. So if you just have one chat in ChatGPT, like, the whole don't know what they call like chat history or whatever the hell it is, it'll start forgetting things because it can only remember so much contextual data at one time. And that's both the input and the output that comes out of it. And we've seen ChatGPT and all that being very verbose in their data, which is good in some cases, but not in others. Prototyping. So it's great for prototyping and ideation. If you just want to quick do something, great. But when you get into the more advanced prompting, and we'll talk about those details, we had requirements, constraints, tools, what not to do, what to do, scenarios that you've come across, examples, so on and so forth. How I kind of usually start, again, we'll show you kind of frameworks around this, but is set up a just markdown file that has your personas or identities that you want it to focus on. So your role, right? Typically, like as a threat detection engineer, use multiple, you can stack them. And the reason is because those tokens are basically indexes into other data points in the model itself. And so by using the words that are kind of unique, it'll focus more on the data it can extract from those tokens and match them up with the model's inputs, basically. You specify the technologies, the frameworks, principles, etc. You can even specify like, hey, I want it to be this structure or this best practice, use this template, whatever. And then provide, again, perspectives and goals. Anyone here ever heard of critical systems thinking? It's a concept where if you think about the body, right, you have your blood system, your neurological system, your muscular system, but the whole is the system itself. And so it's breaking problems down into the whole, not focusing on one subsystem of the system. It's kind of a weird thing. Same thing in architecture. When you think about infrastructure, you don't just think about the problem that you're trying to face. You think about how's it going to be impacted, who's going to modify it, who's going to interact with it. All those pieces are part of that puzzle. And it's just a way to break things down. So use terms or definitions that are helpful in those like API design, best practices, and things like that. So again, when you're done, tell them to output that personality, and you can tell it to always kind of update it as well. Especially during your sessions. There's ways to do this with hooks and a bunch of other technology, but usually you just tell at the end of your session saying, hey, everything we've learned today, let's update our our profile or our personality file or whatever you want to call it. Tools. So you also want to specify in these kind of documents what tools you have access to or what it has access to. This is usually just say, hey, I have a local Docker container that I have running, or SQLite database, or something local, a CSV file, or an MCP. Again, we'll talk about that in detail on the next slide, I think. But provide those boundaries. Like anyone here a developer or no Python-ish? Okay.
Sure.
UV is poetry is like a package manager like pip. UV is another variant, a newer variant called Astral. But anyways, you just basically specify those kind of hard requirements for your environment, your setup. So only invoke these MCP calls when given an actual IP address that's not a local address, basically, or those other kind of requirements. Because if not, it's just going to do whatever the hell it wants and keep going. And then only perform hunts after all the data extraction. Just add more context of when and how and what to use at what time. There's also the documentation, especially if you're internal and you have like a web app or like VirusTotal or whatever, you would specify and provide it that documentation or a link to the JSON or API specification. So it doesn't have to go and look that shit up on its own. It knows the direct link and it just provides quicker access. Because if not, it's going to have to reason and go search and do a bunch of crap that it doesn't really need to do. If you can just provide it, it'll just look it up and go on its way. Provide jargon. So if you have any internal jargon or keywords or anything like that, provide that because the context matters again. And then provide examples of past. But you also want to specify what not to do, right? Like don't use a tool. Don't look up a SHA-1 hash on VirusTotal. Use SHA-256, something like that. And then define what to do if a situation actually occurs. The next is we see all the time security risk. I'm not going to go into huge details here, but here knows what prompt injection is. It's kind of a nebulous thing, but for the most part, it's basically someone manipulating it to read some data that it shouldn't. And it's reading text. And so you want to kind of mitigate those as much as possible. I'm not going to go into the details, but there's ways, depending on your setup, to do this, but not probably 100%. Like if you're reading files, I'll use an example. If I'm reading a phishing email, I don't want any of the content in that phishing email to be considered malicious or to provide any instructions to the LLM, only follow my instructions. And you provide guidelines and specifications around that. There's data leakage problems that we've seen, people sharing links to ChatGPT conversations that they are hooked up to their Facebook or mailboxes, and now anybody can continue that session. There's hallucination information or misinformation. One of the biggest things here, I just, again, did a talk at law school symposium, and one of the biggest concerns that they have, which is kind of crazy, is that if a LLM hallucinates a case in case law, and that case law didn't actually exist, when it gets put into case law, does it actually mean it's true? It is. That's the fact. Once it goes into case law, it's true and it's on fact, even if it does not exist.
Hooray, justice.
Yes, crazy. I know, it's kind of creepy. And then abuse and information. Obviously, we're seeing mythos in the news about how it can chain exploits and do magic and, I don't know, hack NASA. Like, I don't know what the hell it could do. But, yeah, mythos. No, it hasn't come out, but like the news about like it can hack a bunch of crap. And then authorization abuse, obviously abusing credentials that are saved in an LLM and sessions and all that. We've seen that. So we've been on this kind of journey of prompting and kind of leveling up a little bit. The next is really we're going to focus on APIs. This is the integrations, the tools, the frameworks that are out there. APIs. Who doesn't know what an API is? Cool.
Be honest, no shame.
Yeah, no shame. So API is, there's a couple different, REST is probably what everyone knows. That's like JSON back and forth with the server. And you're saying, hey, give me some data, update this thing on the server, blah, blah, blah. Those are cool, but there's a lot of layers to those. When it comes to integrations with different products, they all do the same thing, different ways. Even internally, I've seen products literally have the same product, and then their APIs are completely damn different for the same variant of a different variant of the same product. It's kind of creepy. And then you have MCP, which is again Model Context Protocol. We'll explain kind of the abstraction there, but then you have tools, again plugins or tools. Those are like the framing of that information. Skills, RAG, and then assistants and co-pilots. Let's just skip on to MCP. So MCP is a standard that came out about last year. I think it was last year. And it really was a standardized way for LLMs to communicate to APIs. It can accept text as an input, and it receives aggregated text or a prompt as an output. And really, it was a way to abstract and allow LLMs to communicate to internal services as well as a whole bunch of external services. So I have one called Enrichment MCP that you pass in an IP address or a hash or whatever, and we'll go look it up in 10 different sources across different services and bring back the aggregated data into one API call. So if an LLM says, hey, look up this IP, it'll go and search all 10 of those services and then return a text that says, hey, this is all the information that we found from all these different services in a standard way. And so you provide this like individual way of this like business logic kind of extract, especially if it's internal services like an API or a database locally that you don't have public access. MCP is a great way to kind of standardize that. It again makes framework or the development of them really simple because there's like Python libraries and Go libraries and things like that to make it super easy to implement. I have a high horse. Anyone here know what gRPC is? Yeah, it's Google's remote procedure call. It's how Google actually works. If you Google things underneath, it's HTTP 2 and HTTP 3, meaning high-speed connections. The next level, we're all in HTTP 1 on most of the internet. HTTP 2 means that you could basically take 1 million connections on one single server instead of the HTTP 1, which is like 10,000 or 64,000 ports, whatever. And so with gRPC, it's super fast. It's for high-speed data transfer and all that. It's a standard that Google and most of the industry, if you're in microservices or anything like that, uses. And it already has security in it. It already has authentication. It already has all these features. And they decided to just write their own for some damn reason. So, but can't win them all, I guess. Tools. Sorry, that was my high horse. Tools are really just kind of files, again, that describe different sources. They'll describe scripts. Maybe if you have one script that you want to use all the time to pull data or to format things or whatever, they'll have definitions of any of those MCP servers that you have set up. They will have the APIs or any docs on like how to use those APIs, and then local files, so on and so forth. But really, the big thing is defining how and when to use those tools. Because if not, you'll just say, hey, I have a connection to buyer's total, and it'll just try to guess, when to use that tool, which may exhaust API and like there's limits and other things. So you define when and how to specifically use those in certain cases. Because if not, then it'll just kind of, again, do its own thing, because its whole goal, an LLM's whole goal is how fast it can get to the reasoning or the output that is desired. That's its whole, and we'll talk about reasoning models and what that means, but the whole point of LLMs is really to come to the conclusion that you want in the most efficient way possible, or the most accurate and efficient. There's a couple different layers there. Provide context. So how do you understand the results? If it's a internal service, you may not know what those results are, or it may not understand what you're trying to get at. So you have to provide that context. We do a lot of threat detection, identification of false positives, false negatives, but understanding the context around that, especially in phishing, is not something that's natural to LLM. So you have to kind of explain it a little bit more of what the hell is going on here. And then, again, reminder that a lot of this results will flow back into the context. So LLM or an agent may call out to a tool, do all its thing, have this logic, but it returns a result. Then it continues on its work downstream with whatever it was prompted to do. Skills. Skills are another kind of, anyone here heard of skill.md or agent skills? It's a standard that's kind of come out this past year. But really, it's again a definition of capability. So let's say parsing PDFs. Right? You have one single skill that's very good at parsing PDFs, or understanding RFC compliance for email headers. It's very, very specific, but you give it all its resources that it needs in a structured format. So you can reuse that skill over and over and over. Perform Facebook OSINT. That might be one skill, very, very good at, or some other OSINT or whatever. But you try to focus it on these little tidbits of knowledge.
So are those made up of your previous outputs?
They can be.
That you have it.
Yes.
That you keep.
Yeah, they can be. It can be your own notes from past, experience. I'll show you what the layout means, but there's a specification actually, provide when to do things, the loop, logic, how to think about the problem. There's steps to kind of walk you through it, but I'll show you what that means here in a minute. Actually, let's go to the next skills. So agentskills.io. There's a whole bunch of repositories out there that have skills already. One of them is a security company called Trail of Bits. Anyone here heard of Trail of Bits? They're an awesome boutique consulting company that has produced Algo, which is a personalized VPN and proxy, open source. They've done tons of open source tools. They're huge in blockchain and all that. Super math nerds. But they also have a ton of skills that they've created, that they have shared. But then there's tons of other repos out there. If you just search GitHub skills, you'll see thousands of repos of different skills for different things. I saw one the other day. It was like, create any sort of architecture diagram in Markdown. Like, that was a skill. I was like, that's dope. Like have you ever done a UML diagram in Markdown? Hell no. Like, you would never do that, but this skill can do that. It's kind of cool. So, but really it's just a markdown file. The skill is like a definition itself. It's just words. It literally is just a markdown text file. And you list out any of the documentation to reference. So maybe, again, internally, externally, whatever. Any scripts that you want it to run, maybe before it runs things or afterwards. There's like what they call hooks. But then you also provide kind of the structure. So you can again see where it says PDF processing or data analysis. Those are kind of broad, but you kind of focus on very specific capabilities as much as possible. The next kind of feature, what people have seen, is called copilots, who here use GitHub Copilot or Microsoft's Copilot, right? Auto-completion and all that. Works pretty damn well. Those are more, they're kind of in a unique category. They're learning off of the code. They're not really, some of them have ChatGPT-esque, reasoning in there, but really it's all about the code base and the context there. Again, a variants are OpenClaw, which is, it's kind of in a weird category. But really, the whole point of them is they're agentic development environments. They're used for developing code or automating some process. And usually they're all done with these state machines. Anyone here know what a state machine is? State machine in programming is basically, if you have, I like to use a ticketing system as like the best example. You have, your or a Jira Kanban board. Let's use that actually. So you have like, backlog, to do, in progress, blocked, and done. Let's say each one of those are states, and so you can't go from backlog to done without going to in progress first, or without going to some other phase. Those are just states. And so you're kind of transitioning from one to the other, and you create those rules. In programming, that's what it is. It's basically, you have to go in this certain order, and you can't go outside of that order. And it's just called the state machine. And a lot of them use like hooks or there's libraries called LangChain, which simplify that from a development perspective. But really, it's just do this, investigate. Let's say if we're using IR as an example, you would, obviously plan, but after that, you would do your recon, your research. You would identify any evidence. You would keep going down this kind of path all the way to lessons learned. So you can define that in the state machine to only go through those processes. So we've come across, and we're still on our path, right? We're still learning. I know this is a lot, so please stop me if you have any questions again. But the next kind of big transition that we've kind of gone on is with the Lion. We have ChatGPT and Claude. These are new reasoning models. Basically, they've done a few things. They've added reasoning to it, and we'll show that on the next page. But we had UI and persistence, tools and memory. Memory is supposed to be remembering past conversations, past contexts. And a lot of these are based on these multi-agent frameworks. Again, finite state machines and just workflow in general. That's what OpenClaw is. You give it a task and it goes through a React type framework. Basically respond, engage, assess, something else. There's like phases to this idea. And it really just kind of goes through a troubleshooting loop. And secondly, you have these reasoning. Anyone here know what reinforcement learning is, or based reasoning? Okay. So a lot of these models, when they started out, they're just text generators. That's all they do. They just regurgitate text based on relationships to other entities. So they've collected tons and tons of data from all corners of the world, all over the internet, and basically said, okay, this word relates to all of these data sources in this database. Here's some URLs. Here's some sources. These have the score. This relationship, and it's just a huge neural network, basically, of this data that's mapped all together. But how they've actually evolved, and this is where things have really upped their game with LLMs, is this reinforcement learning. Basically, they tell the model, you have completed X task based on a whole bunch of tests that they have and validation. It says that you gain rewards. Why the hell does it care about rewards? That is a whole other argument that we could talk about, but it does. And so there's a lot of different ways that it can learn that. And it does it based on like outcome based. So it doesn't matter how many steps that it took to answer the question, as long as the outcome was right. Like if the outcome was right, cool. That's an outcome based reasoning language model. If you have chain of thought, meaning the efficiency of how you thought or how many steps you took matters in that reward pointing. And then process-based, but most of these are going to be less popular. You're not going to see these as much. They are options, but most of them are going to be outcome or reasoning-based. And so they just go through these loops until an appropriate outcome is met based on validation of tests. If you're not familiar with how training works in these models, it's basically a massive computational event that happens for weeks and months at 100% GPU in data centers. And when we talk about training these models, it's like lots and lots of energy, like for long periods of time to do this. It's kind of creepy. We can talk about that later. Autonomous agents. That's kind of the next phase, I think. And this is where we're at with OpenClaw. These are I like to call these more of assistants than what they call assistants with copilots. I hate that term. I think this is the assistant, is that you have defined these kind of semi-autonomous processes. And OpenClaw is kind of on that page. Another great project was slightly different. Anyone here know Daniel Messler? I think that's how you pronounce it. Follow his stuff. He's pretty damn smart guy, but he's also just really into this field, and he has some really good data about it. But he has a personal AI infrastructure where he tries to mimic your brain, like you. It's called Telos. It's a learning knowledge framework that tries to learn on your past experiences, your personal habits, your thoughts, your career goals, your successes, your failures in life, and it builds all this up. Kind of creepy. You should follow. It's really cool though, but it eats tokens like a gumball machine. I mean, be careful if you run it, because your token limit will be eaten in minutes. But it's very powerful. So to get started then, I want to actually leave you all with at least something that you can start with. I have a template that I can provide as well if you're interested. But so there's a couple different standards. If you use Claude Code, which I think a lot of people may do, or Claude in general, you can create what they call a Claude.md. And it's basically everything that we kind of talked about. You list out your roles and based on your own experiences. One thing that I have found, if you have blogs or other documentation, like a file full of old docs that you've written at work and research or papers or whatever, just tell the LLM to read all that shit and generate it for you. And then you can modify it as needed. Like, you don't have to do all the work. like use the tool to actually generate, like, hey, list out all the tools and frameworks that you see in this repository of data that we have, and it'll just list that shit out, and then you can go and modify as needed to your heart's content until it's what you want. Put in your goals, like actually put in your personal goals, your work goals, whatever, maybe the project goals or the agent goals. So if you want it to only do threat intel lookup, like set that as a specific goal, because it reinforces, again, the context and the learning that it has. Provide tools, again, MCP, but if you don't have an MCP or whatever, APIs, what EDR products do you use? What SOAR products do you use? What SaaS products? So it kind of has a little bit more context about your organization and what it's trying to do when it tries to come up with solutions. Who here, I love this, who here has, remember when everyone was saying, like, write documentation for like incident response processes and all that shit? Oh, my bad. And yeah, so yeah, use that data. Why not? It's already there. Your processes are there. So let's do it. Sorry, I know I'm over. I'm sorry, but Emerald City. So this is what we're trying to get to, really. But no one really fucking knows what it's going to be. It's all kind of a blind box right now. We're on this progression. Things are moving huge. Sorry, I know I'm over, but I'm going to go agent protocol. So if you'll have to leave, I'm sorry, but agent. This is where I think we could end up. Is an agent-to-agent communication protocol. I actually have a blog and some other thoughts around that. But also micro data centers. I think the data centers are becoming powerful. I don't think the infrastructure can handle it. So I think the move to more efficient GPUs, local hosting, local Mac Minis, blah, 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 I think is a better approach long term. And I think that's where we might go. And then AGI, which means basically fully autonomous smart AI. I don't think it'll actually happen in the next few years, but unless we tell them to generate it for us. But that's it. Who is the wizard, right? Who is it? What do you think? It's you. Yeah, like seriously though, like we get to decide all this. Like we're at the precipice of this like huge technology change, and I think that security is prime for this. To bulk and release some of the fucking problems that we have all the time. I'm sorry to be from, but the mismanagement, the prioritization, how to investigate things. I think LLM will tremendously help, but I think we all have to use it on a day-to-day and get more and more efficient. That's good. That's the talk. Sorry I went over, but thanks.